The times of Noah, he looked down and there were angels sitting on earth. There were humans sitting on earth. The image of God, both in the heavenlies and the earthlies, had partnered together to screw the whole thing up. There was little to no hope. But God, in his great love, looked down and saw just one guy. One guy. And I don't even know that he was a particularly good guy. He was considered blameless for his time. God saw one guy, and his hope and his love was so great for just that one guy that he decided the masterpiece goes on. We're going to continue this. So he pours out his love and he sustains creation through the time when his heart is so grieved by all of the pain that his poor human imagers are going through. He saves them. And he hopes. He sees the timeline when the flood is done, the timeline where humans get back on track. They're fruitful, they multiply, they fill the earth, and they cultivate it to be like Eden. Love. It's the point of everything, and at the same time, it feels sometimes like it's the most difficult thing to preach about. Because we all get it. We know what love is. We've seen it. We've experienced it. I think that's part of the reason that's so hard to talk about. Because when people talk about love, they immediately have to default to stories or to poetry or to music. It is almost easier to sing about love than to just define it. Because love is too precious to just be caught up in normal words. I think this is kind of the case when it comes to artists. When you see a piece of art, it's beautiful, you love it, it's provoking, it makes you think, you are deep in thought about the thing that you are looking at, and you want to tell other people all about it. You want to see if they see what you see. But then if you go and ask the artist like what they were doing with it, they're not always exciting to listen to. Have you ever read a book from an artist about art? For me, they're like one of the most pointless kinds of books that there are. It's always like, this person is a renowned artist and they've written this book so that you can understand what they're getting at. And you read it, you're like, no, I understood nothing. Like that didn't help me. Because once art becomes like something that you diagnose, something that you're trying to kind of strip down and explain, like it just starts to lose what it actually is, which is almost a feeling. And so love often hits that same way. Like you try to describe love, it doesn't hit in the same way as though if you sang it, as though if it was a poem, as though if it was a story. You need to experience it in some way to know. And so I've been thinking through the story in Scripture, and I've been trying to think in my mind, like what is the grander story of love that might be told, not just at Christmas, but starting way back at the beginning and then moving forward. And as I was thinking over that, I was kind of imagining the Trinity in conversation with one another. That God already has existed forever, right? He's eternal. He has no beginning, no end. And then somewhere in the midst of that, he's created the angels. And the angels are a part of this creation. And one day he comes to creation and says to them, to his angels, like, I want to make more. I want to make more. We got these 2 trillion galaxies down there. There's that pale blue dot of a planet. And the artist wants to paint. I want to create down there something that can live and thrive, something beautiful. And in the midst of all that beauty, I want to take my image and put it on one of the creatures down there so that they have the capacity to rule over it like I do. Just as the angels were likely made in God's image to image him in the heavenlies, so he would make humans to image him on the earthlies. And so he begins to tell the angels, this is the plan. This is what we're going to do. And I can imagine him calling Jesus, who is also eternal. Jesus to his side, telling him, go get your brothers. Go get the angels. Go get the sons of God and bring them into a council. I have a great announcement, something you and me and the Spirit we're going to do. We're going to get together and we're going to work on that pale blue dot of a planet. It's right now, it's just chaotic waters. That's it. It's just spinning around. There's no life there. It's dangerous there. But we're going to take that as a clean slate. We're going to take that as a blank canvas and we're going to begin to put art into it. So he announces it to the angels, and the Bible says that as they watched God create, that they sang for joy. And Jesus comes alongside and begins to craft with God. And the Spirit is told to go down and hover over the waters and brood over the earth like it's an egg getting ready to hatch with new life. And so the Trinity is at work, making and making. And moment by moment goes by and new kinds of creatures are being made. New kinds of flowers, new kinds of plants. And you can just imagine the artist falling in love with his art. The passion to keep making more and more. That it's not enough to just have one kind of bird. We need thousands of birds. It's not enough to just make one kind of variety of cow. Let's make hairy ones too and put them all in Scotland. And so it keeps making and making and making. And finally they get to the chief point. We still don't have something down here to image us. We still need something to be in charge of this. We need stewards here in creation that will rule on our behalf. And so the Trinity gets together and they start to play in the earth, play in the clay. Begin to shape something, start to pull it together, and finally they get to the point where like, that's it. That's the one. That's the pinnacle of creation right there. And God invites the Spirit to breathe into it. And so the Spirit breathes. Suddenly skin comes on. Organs are filled inside. Hair begins to grow. And they have humans. And there's something about this. I mean, all of the art here has been good, but now that it's all done, now that it's complete, now that humans are also brought into the picture, now the whole thing, God steps back to look at the masterpiece he's painted, and it is deemed very good. Very good. And now, throughout the Old Testament, we have these glimpses of God. You can't see God face to face or you die. Scripture tells us that. You can't see the Father face to face or you die. But the Old Testament tells us that there is a form, a kind of a person of God that you can see and you can live. In the Old Testament, this person of God is known as the angel of the Lord, though sometimes it's just called God. God comes to wrestle with Jacob. Yahweh just walks right up to Abraham. The angel of the Lord comes and speaks to humans throughout history as though he is God. It is this person of God that you can see face to face and live. So Samson's parents even seemed surprised that they saw him and they survived. Mysteriously absent in the New Testament because Jesus takes his place. Jesus is the person of God that we can see and live. And Adam and Eve are put in a garden where God takes up his residence and lives with them. And as I think over the fact that God is walking in the cool of the day with Adam and Eve, I recognize that the only person of the Trinity that could be would be Jesus. And so before we even meet Jesus historically in the New Testament, we have Adam and Eve with him in the Old Testament, enjoying his company. I can imagine Jesus up in heaven so thrilled about God's creation saying, I'd like to go down there. I'd like to teach those humans that we made how to live, the proper way to grow in character and strength, the ways that their bodies work, what they can be used for, the ways in which they can take care of the animals. And I want to ask them what they would name the animals. I want to get in their mind. Like we made this world and we put them in charge. So why don't we bring them into the delegation and get some thoughts? I just imagine the Father nodding in approval and Jesus going down to the garden and beginning to spend his days with Adam and Eve. Which from a scriptural standpoint, it seems like they're probably just kids, not adults. We don't know what age, but they have to learn. There's innocence about them. They don't understand the way that things work yet. And so here's Jesus with Adam and Eve explaining the world to them. That every day they might hear his footsteps and they recognize it's him because they always hear his footsteps. They recognize his footsteps at the end of their time in Eden. And that Jesus would come and say, okay, I brought some animals with me today. Technically, these ones belong in North America. You don't understand that yet. But I brought them over here so you can name them now. What do you feel? What about for this one? Day by day, delegating tasks to them. Okay, so one of the primary ways that we want you guys to worship is through farming. Our idea is that as you multiply, you guys will be able to eventually leave this garden to expand the garden. You should go into the next place and you see that forest over there. It's kind of it's just not put together. It's kind of wild. Well, we're going to send you in there so that you can come up with new ideas as to how that area should be cultivated so that it can match the garden. And we think, like, as you guys keep having children, like the image of God will just spread out and you guys will overtake this whole pale blue dot of a planet until the whole thing looks like here. Your families will love and your children will love, will teach you all the ways of love because you can't build this garden without it. In the same way I've been depositing into you, you'll deposit into your friends and your families beyond you until this whole thing is just one giant planet built around the concept of love. So day by day, Jesus walks with them. Day by day, Jesus looks for their input on creation. Day by day, Jesus teaches them about creation. Day by day, year by year, moment by moment. And during this time, as they're growing together, there's also a bit of a test that's growing. Spirit has searched the heart both of angels and of humans. And he notices a tension. There's something in these young humans where they have not fully grasped Jesus' ways yet. There are other concepts out there. And the Spirit has noticed that there's an angel who wants to kind of broadcast those other ideas. And I wonder, the Spirit reporting into God. I've searched the hearts of angels and of humans, and there's some tension brewing here. There's a storm coming. All of this stuff where we're teaching them about love, it has a space to run into a little bit of a conundrum. And God's stepping back in his omniscience and looking at all the past forward. I think he thinks to himself, I see it. I see it. What would you have me do about it? My son is smitten with these creatures. He spends every day in the garden with them. He loves them. I love them. This is my masterpiece. This is very good. What would you have me do? Erase it? As the Trinity begins to speak to each other about the correct way to go about things, God sees the future where they listen to the serpent. And the world of love begins to get thrown off by a world of hate trying to break itself in. But he also sees a future where they don't, where they deny the serpent and they say, we're not going to have anything to do with that. You are not Jesus. He's the one that we listen to. And God sees the future with all the pain. God sees the future with all the love. He sees the way in which moving forward with all this pain would lead to the pain that you have gone through. But he also sees the future where Adam and Eve keep listening to God. And then a few months, few years, few centuries go by. And Jesus says, I think they've hit the point. Father, I think you can send your spirit down here to empower them to the next level. I think they're ready to receive things like your spiritual gifts. Because for whatever reason, Jesus said that God would send us the Holy Spirit so long as Jesus went and asked his Father to do it. Maybe Jesus planned on doing it a long time ago in a different story that we could have told. Maybe God was waiting. Jesus, you tell me when they're ready, and I will gift them with even more power and authority than they had. But we know how the story goes. Hate enters into the picture. We listen to the wrong God. We listen to the wrong voice, the wrong wisdom, and it begins to corrupt everything. It snakes its way around the planet and begins to choke it out so that you can no longer seemingly get involved in any part of the world without having to face the way in which sin and hate have polluted it. You can no longer simply farm without the thoughts of other ways, sinful ways to treat animals to generate income that will then create even more wealth for you. Even the basics of the worship through farming and multiplying, the whole thing will be screwed up. Because the other voice that we listen to was elevated when we listened to it, empowered when we listened to it. The other voice became, as Paul would say, the God of this world. So now we find ourselves in this chaotic battle between Adam and Eve looking toward God, and then Adam and Eve looking toward the other God. And this is where the story of God's love only gets stronger. Because you would think in the midst of all of this chaos, in the midst of all this pain, in the midst of all this suffering that God never wanted for any of us, never desired for anyone, and has not written into history, we wrote it ourselves. All of that stuff would maybe make God look down at us and just say, this whole thing, this whole masterpiece is so messed up. Let's just wipe it out. And at one point, it got so bad that he got dangerously close. The times of Noah, he looked down and there were angels sinning on earth. There were humans sinning on earth. The image of God, both in the heavenlies and the earthlies, had partnered together to screw the whole thing up. There was little to no hope. But God, in his great love, looked down and saw just one guy. One guy. And I don't even know that he was a particularly good guy. He was considered blameless for his time. So who knows how much sin, if the world needs to be wiped out and he's okay for that time period, how good he was. But God saw one guy, and his hope and his love was so great for just that one guy that he decided the masterpiece goes on. We're going to continue this. So he pours out his love and he sustains creation through the time when his heart is so grieved by all of the pain that his poor human imagers are going through. He saves them. And he hopes. He sees the timeline when the flood is done, the timeline where humans get back on track. They're fruitful, they multiply, they fill the earth, and they cultivate it to be like Eden. At 1208 Greenwood, we're more than just a church. We're a family growing together in faith, both in person and online. From our original worship music to biblical teaching, which you can access anywhere, we're creating authentic experiences every day. Your giving helps keep our ministries running and creates impactful content and music that reaches people wherever they are. Join our mission to serve and grow. Support 1208 Greenwood today. The link is in the description. He also sees the timeline where they build a giant tower to try to stuff God into their ways of thinking so that they might ascend to heaven or bring God down out of heaven. And they choose the wrong timeline again. Time goes by and God frees those who are being oppressed. He pulls them out of slavery and he elevates them. And they use the power that they've been given to become the most oppressive force in history, to the point that God says, you have more blood on your hands than any of the nations that you wiped out for their corruption. Time and time and time and time again. When we think it would be the end, when we think God would give up, his hope and his love carry on. To the point that I can imagine Jesus coming up to his Father and just being like, you got to let me go back down there. You got to let me go back down there. I know that we have the plans to restore these people. They've been written down since the beginning of time. These are the descendants of Adam and Eve. I spent time with them. They're good. They're very good. Your masterpiece, it's wonderful. It's beautiful. And I want to save them. I want to put things right. So send me down there. I will cross the cosmos for them. And imagine the Father looking down at the world again and saying, oh, Jesus, that serpent has so wrapped himself around everything down there. If I send you down there and you live like a human, as they were supposed to be back in the Garden of Eden, if you actually live like Adam and Eve were supposed to live, you're not going to survive. They're going to eat you alive. From the moment you are born, angels and humans will work together to snuff you out. Demons and humans will come together to try to kill you. Through the various authorities that they've infected, they will turn their pride against you. The family that you're born to, you know I can't put you in a palace. They'll miss the point. I'm going to have to put you in the lowest places. Your birth itself is going to have to be, in a feeding trough to get the point across. You're going to have to be so extreme about my ways that from the very get-go, you're going to have to get people's attention. And then, if you go and teach my ways, you have seen what they've done to the prophets that we sent that did the same. They'll kill you. I'll send the Spirit. He'll come and wrap around you. I will give you the kinds of things that Adam and Eve were destined for, but they lost the ability to move there. I'll send the Spirit and give you those kinds of things. But still that won't be enough. Because if you use the Spirit in the wrong way, you're going to end up just like the rest of the world. You're going to have to tell the greatest love story ever told. Because as soon as you are born down there, that whole world has been so infected with sin, they're going to try to kill you. And Jesus looking at the Father and saying, I know. I think that's the point. I think that's where this whole thing has to revolve around. They've forgotten who they are. They don't know how much I love them. They don't know that I would die for them. They don't know that they are worth my own life, my own blood. They're like my children. These are all my grandchildren. I told Adam and Eve a long time ago that I would take care of this. I would find a way to wipe out that serpent, and it would be through their descendants. I'll be that descendant. Send me down there. And God thinks through all the pain that has ever happened to a person on earth, and it all weighs on his shoulders all at the same moment. You can think of the kinds of things that would happen to his son if he were to be bold enough to go down and face that same pain. Who knows? Maybe the Trinity argues with each other, and it's probably not how it works. But eventually they come to the conclusion, this will be hard, but it could work. Not even it could, it will work. But it will be hard. Jesus will have to listen at every turning point to be able to walk the path that God is setting up for him. And so Jesus subjects himself to the story of Christmas, a part of the greatest love story ever told. That God would be willing to put on human flesh, that the God of gods would be willing to make himself lowly enough to be placed in a feeding trough instead of on a cosmic throne. And he would then walk day by day with those same humans that he walked with in the garden. Those humans would be so wrapped up in that snake that they wouldn't get it. They wouldn't understand. They would not be able to comprehend the kinds of things that he was doing. But in the end, it would change everything. So they followed the plan. He came down. He lived the earthly life. He faced sin. He didn't choose to follow it. God sent his Spirit. Jesus walked in it, and he didn't abuse the power he was given. And then eventually, he died on a cross, reminding us of our worth to him. You are worth the blood of Christ and the life of God. So much so that instead of that being a statement, he made it reality so that you would see the love story. And now, the love story continues. Now we live in a time where the pain continues, the suffering continues, where I sit in rooms with people that tell me their stories and try to comprehend how God can exist and be good if they have gone through all of this. And I think Jesus feels the pain too. Because the stories that I hear in those sessions are not the stories that God has written. It's the stories that the serpent has twisted into our lives. And so Jesus points us back to the story of Christmas. That's how much I care. And the story of Easter, that's how much I care. The story of self-sacrificial enemy love, that's how much he cares. That he would be faithful to Adam and Eve, whom he loved and cared for long ago, to step back into earth again, this time at his own expense, that we might experience the great love of God.
Green.